Are you thinking about applying for subspecialty training? Are you not quite sure? Do you want to go down that road? Do you want to become a spin doctor? Or actually, do you want to continue becoming a general paediatrician? This is a question that a lot of trainees think about, and I'm never quite sure whether it's for them. So in this podcast, I'm going to talk about the things you should consider before committing yourself down this road.
Dr. Uma's podcast is a series of podcasts providing career advice, work-based tips and learning skills, helping you become a better doctor with a healthy work-life balance. These podcasts are in association with MRCPCH speciality courses, who specialise in courses in interview skills, application form writing and communication skills. Check it out on MRCPCH specialitycourses.co.uk.
Hi, welcome to today's episode of Dr. Uma's podcast. I'm Uma, I'm a paediatric cardiologist, and today I'm going to be talking about whether you should be applying for subspecialty training. As I'm recording this, the application for GRID, subspecialty training in paediatrics, is going to open very soon. So it may be a time where you're not applying at this minute, but you are now considering it because now that everyone else is applying for it, it sparked that question. Should I be applying for subspecialty training? Is it right for me? Should I be a general paediatrician? Or some people have talked about becoming a spin doctor, and I'm not quite sure. This is a question I get asked a lot, and I get people that also come to us, MRCPCH speciality courses, wanting to become specialists within a particular area, but actually in conversation they realize it's not quite right for them. So I thought it'd be a really good idea to make this episode just to put across some things that you may want to consider. So I think the first thing to sort of put right out there is, why is it that you're considering becoming a specialist? Is it that you'd quite like the idea of being a specialist? Is it this Grey's Anatomy, this Hollywoodness of, I want to say to people, I'm a specialist, I do this. And I think if it's that, and purely that, then I think specialism isn't for you, because there's a lot of hard work and a lot of things you need to sort of potentially sacrifice to go down this road, and problems you may face along the way and even at the end. And so if your motive to become a specialist, whichever area that may be, cardiology, neonatology, gastro, neuro and so forth, and all you just want to say is, I just want to tell people that I'm sort of the top of the field, or I'm very good at one thing, then I think this conversation's already come to a very natural end. This isn't for you. But if it is actually, it's not that, and I'm sure it isn't, then what else would you consider? So the one thing to think about is, are you really passionate about the specialty? Is it something that you're very obsessed with? Do you really enjoy this one particular area? So, for example, for me, as a pediatric cardiologist, I was always interested in cardiology. My interest sparked way back when I was 17, 18 years old. I went to a cardiology department, pediatric cardiology department, to do my work experience, sort of on my way to apply to med school. And I fell in love with pediatric cardiology. I loved so many aspects of it. I fell in love with pediatrics. I thought the whole environment of pediatrics was really nice. But more specifically to cardiology, I loved the echoing, the scanning aspect of it. It was very hands-on. I then discovered MRI and what they were doing there. And back then it wasn't as advanced as it is right now. But then also like the intensive care and then the outpatient. So there was loads of elements about cardiology that I really liked. And when I went to med school, I think for me, a lot of things just went back to cardiology. And I realized this is the path I want to take. And no matter how many, times I'd read the same condition or watch something or be part of a conversation cardiology related, I was always very infused and very excited and really learnt a lot. So I think for me, it was something that naturally came to me and I followed it. And again, you have to ask yourself, are you like that? Or is it that you revised for this particular area in your clinical, in your exams for MRCVCH, and you really enjoyed it, or you found it a little bit interesting? And I think you have to sort of balance the two. Do you think you could do this every day for the rest of your life? And of course, there are going to be variations, and there's going to be, things you can do within your specialty to keep life interesting. But as you're going to spend your whole life doing this one area, and if you think, actually, no, I like it, but I don't really want to, do one particular area to death, then maybe that's something you need to think about. And actually, if it is that, and you're not obsessed with the area, then consider spin. Be a pediatrician with a special interest, where you can dedicate a time of your consultant week in that area, but you're still doing general pediatrics, the area, the specialty that you really fell in love with, which was pediatrics, and you like the breadth of sort of different things that you see, and the sort of the interactions that you have, and the different conditions you also see as part of that. Because as a specialist, you're just going to be purely focused in your area, and actually anything outside it, you're going to refer on and not get too heavily involved in. So again, if you're like, well, actually, no, I quite like those other areas, and I like being in the assessment unit, I like being in A&E, and then actually subspecialty training may not be for you. And the other thing to think about when considering, whether the time is right to you. So you've made the decision that you're going to go down a specialty route, and that's great. Is your CV up to date? Do you have all the things that are relevant to your area? So that's, things like leadership, management skills. Do you have the clinical experience to show that you're interested? Have you done things, jobs, rotations, fellowships, and so forth, that show you're very interested in this particular area? Have you done teaching and educational work? Have you done research? All of these things are going to be part of your form, and they make up your CV. And if you haven't done a lot other than you've shown commitment, you've done the job, then you're not in I don't think you'll be in a very good position to be scored very well, because they're going to look at all the other areas of your CV. Whether you think it's relevant or not, it is part of the scoring system. So it may well be that you need to delay your decision as to when you're going to apply, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to apply. But again, I've met people that when they realize they have to do all these other things, they think to themselves, actually, I don't really want to spend a lot of time doing these other areas of the CV. I'm really interested, but I don't really want to become very competitive, because you are going to be applying against a lot of people who are very, I think the word I'm trying to look for is they're competitive. And so if you don't want to do that, then again, there are alternative routes such as spin that would allow you still to do, your area, whatever that may be, along with your job, and actually don't even have to be, and I say this very carefully, because you're still going to have to have some element of competitiveness, because you are going to be applying for consultant jobs, and just because you have an interest, there's also going to be potentially another person who is also wanting that job. So your CV is going to have to be somewhat competitive. So I think if you've already sort of decided and you're like, I want to apply, I know whether, I know what I'm getting myself into, I've got a very good CV, or I'm on my way of getting a very good CV, then this video, this whole podcast episode may not be for you. But I want you to consider, even if you think that, some of the next points I'm going to make about, what it's like being, on the training path of subspecialism. So how many centers are there for your specialty? And where are they across the country? Because potentially, if you are successful, and I hope you are, then you may well end up outside your sort of your home area. So, you could be posted somewhere else in the country because that's the center that you scored, and it may require you to move. And if that's the case, are you willing to move, or will you have to reapply? Now, cardiology doesn't really have that. I don't believe it has limitations to, how many times you can apply. But the other pediatric subspecialties, such as, anything other than cardiology, is governed by the Royal College of Paediatrics, whereas cardiology is governed by the Royal College of Physicians. So if you're going down that road of a non-cardiology thing, you do have a limited number of times that you can apply. And so you need to think about how competitive you are quite soon. And you also have to consider whether it's right for you. So are you going to have to move? And is that right for you? Do you have a family to consider? Do you have a partner? What is their situation? So think about that, and whether that is a conversation. Well, that's a conversation you should be having before you're applying, so that you're both on the same page. The next thing to think about is, I'm not quite sure whether I want to do it, but I really like it. Then what you can do is do a fellowship, do it out of program, or you could, even if you did spin, the first year of most spins are within the specialty, and you can do that as a taster, figure out whether you actually really like it, see how the other side live, as it were. And if it is something that you like, and if it is something that, I do really enjoy this, and I like the lifestyle, then you could always apply. You've not signed anything that tells you, well, if I go down this spin route, that's it. I can't go back and apply for actual, grid training or subspecialty training. But doing a fellowship, or taking a year out, taking a break, and going into that job also will allow you to explore whether it's the right decision for you. So if you're like, I'm not quite sure, I'm still very keen, do a job in that area. It gives you a great insight, and it also gives you opportunity to do research, get some publications, do a poster, because you're going to be in an environment whereby this is where most of your area literature is coming from. The centers, the tertiary centers, are doing a lot of the publications. So being in that environment gives you that opportunity, versus if you were in a small hospital in a DGH, you may not have an opportunity to do any publications or posters. So being in that environment is also very good, helping you to decide, but also making sure you're making the right decision for you. Now, one thing I would always say is that if you are if you want to know more about your subspecialty, speak to people within that specialty, and whether that be at conferences, at open days, or virtual sort of like talks, whether you arrange a visit and you go to someone's clinic and you meet people, registrars or consultants from that specialty, ask them about what the specialty is really all about. What I've noticed at times is people talk to people who are not in that field, but they are senior pediatricians, whether they're their supervisors and mentors, people they work with. And they're like, yeah, I know because I have a friend, or I know because, so-and-so went down that road. And it's a great conversation to have, but it isn't always very useful. And I think in these sort of situations, you've got to be very objective and know the facts for you to make an informed decision. So if that's the case, then I would advise you to, if that's where you've heard a lot of your stuff, speak to people in the field. I think they're the ones that can really tell you what life really is like. They can also give you an idea about, what routes within your area you can go into, how competitive those routes actually are. Are you going to have to do a fellowship after your training? So even after you've finished, you might need additional training to make you a more competitive consultant. And that might need sort of a post-CCT fellowship or somewhat. And is that common? Is that what you're going to be faced? Because you walk in thinking, this training program so many years, and I'm a consultant at the end of it. You just make this assumption you're going to be a consultant somewhere, but actually you might end up having to do more years. So I think you need to speak to people within the field to get a better idea. And that comes to my next point. How many consultant jobs are there at the end of the tunnel? So not only are you competing with a lot of people to get into the training program, and then there's not many of you within the training program, but how many consultant jobs are there at the end? How many people are actually going into a consultant post? Because year by year, it becomes more and more competitive, because people are not retiring at the same rate that people are becoming consultants. So you are going to get a saturation of people that are eligible to be consultants, can apply to be consultants. But if there's no consultant job, what are you going to do? And this is where a lot of people end up going abroad, either for a short period of time or actually having to go abroad and settle abroad. So again, these are the conversations you've got to have with your partner, your life situation, yourself, to say, well, am I happy to do that? So will I have to move and move again? Where would I move to? Is that going to be practical for my family, your kids, your partner, whoever that may be? All of these things you need to consider. And it's better to consider those things now. I mean, I did the same. I was in London, living in London, and traveling to the Midlands. And we were not in a position where we could move. So I had to commute a lot throughout my training. And that caused a lot of stress on myself, because it was very exhausting, but it's something I had to do, because I knew if I didn't, I may well never get another opportunity to have a number of cardiology. It is a very competitive specialty. So I took that and I said, well, can I transfer? And that wasn't possible, because my circumstances were no different when I took the number to when I was in training. So again, people give you this idea, you could always, get a transfer when you're in the training, get your foot in the door and you'll be okay. But actually, no, if you look at the rules, your circumstances have to change in training for you to be eligible to then say, I need a transfer. And then even if you are eligible and say, okay, fine, you can have one, you've got to be sure that there's a gap somewhere, or there's someone in where you want to go that wants to come to where you are, so you do a swap. So it's not as easy as you think it is, and I think I was slightly misled in that conversation, because again, I did not talk to people who were involved in that. I was just talking to people who were senior, and I assume they knew what they were talking about. So again, I think it's very important for you to have the facts. Speak to the deaneries that are involved, speak to the college that's involved, speak to people in the specialty, get an idea of the climate and what life is like and what sort of thing you're going to be facing, and then make an informed choice. Now, I'm not telling you all of this to say, look, life is really horrible, don't do it. I'm not discouraging you. If you really want to do it, and if you're really committed, you should do it. Absolutely. We need people to be specialists. But if you're not sure, or actually hearing these things, you think, actually, this isn't, this is not what I want in life. And, I don't want to be living this hustle and bustle in the next 5-10 years, then actually, then go down a different road. Consider spin and consider just staying a pediatrician. One thing I really want to say point blank in this podcast is, being a general pediatrician is not a failure of any sort. Everyone's always really obsessed about, being a specialist, or if you say you are a specialist, it's like, oh, wow. It's somehow like a superpower that you have. there are brilliant general pediatricians that I've met who have inspired me throughout my training and inspired me the way I do things. And I think that, there is nothing wrong being a specialist. It's really up to you what you want out of life, what you find interesting. As long as you enjoy what you do it. Don't think that you have to be a certain thing to somehow feel like you've achieved something. But again, some people may be listening thinking, well, that's really rich. It's coming from a cardiologist that's gone through all of this. I know I have gone through all of this, and it wasn't a very pleasant experience. I don't have any regrets. But I think that it's really important to consider these things if you are on the fence about which way you want to go. Again, if you're very committed in what you're doing and you're fixating, you're like, look, this is where I want to be, this is what I want to do, then do it. No problems at all. But again, if you're someone who really enjoys pediatrics, someone who really sort of likes the other aspects, you like managing, diabetes, you like doing a little bit of epilepsy, you also like, safeguarding strategy meetings, whatever it may be, and that's what really, you do enjoy as well. Think about those things may not be part of your day-to-day life once you enter specialism. And so, it might be that actually you stay where you are, continue your training, finish it, and become a consultant. So I hope that I've given you some sort of points to consider and think about. I hope this has been very useful. Again, if you are thinking about getting subspecialty training and you want advice or coaching towards that pathway, do check us out on MRCP-CH speciality courses. And again, if you are in the midst of writing your form or you need interview coaching, we also provide those services.